Hello friends and allies, it's your quick step for this week. Today we're going to talk about some Canadian history actually. We're going to talk about the Bloc Québécois because they just had a whole show of a night thing, and people seemed interested in Quebec nationalism given one of my videos' history, so I'm going to give you guys a brief history of the Bloc Québécois and talk about what's going down and what it could mean for our upcoming election. For those who didn't watch my video a few months ago on the Quebec 1995 referendum, there's a problem in Canada when it comes to when we try to amend our constitution. We've been trying to do it since the 80s, and every time we do, we get together and there's a whole bunch of different interests, but Quebec gets singled out because it tries to push its national goals and doesn't really see itself as part of Canada per se. In the 90s, we tried to do this with something called the Meech Lake Accord, and after that was another titanic failure, the Bloc Québécois was formed. It was a coalition made up of a few Quebec MPs from both the Liberal and Conservative parties. It was designed to be just this temporary party that would be around so that they could push for Quebec's secession from Canada, and then they would no longer need to exist. And it was led by the former Conservative Minister of Environment, Lucien Bouchard. And in 1993, they won something like 54 of the 75 federal seats in Quebec. If you guys remember, the 1993 election was the one where the Conservative Party utterly collapsed, and the Liberals had a gigantic majority. So much so that the Bloc Québécois, this separatist party, actually became the official opposition, which for you guys in America who don't do that kind of stuff, the official opposition is basically the second largest party. So think like minority leader. And then 1995, there was the referendum. The Bloc Québécois obviously supported it, but it failed. It actually failed by a very small margin, but Lucien Bouchard actually quit politics over it. And the Bloc Québécois was kind of trying to figure out what it was going to do next. It was a party of sovereignty and separation. Now, that had died for at least a little bit. They then had a bit of a leadership crisis. There was a guy, his name was like Michel Gauthier or something like that. He didn't do so well, so that it got replaced with another very prominent member of Quebec politics, Gilles Duceppe. The Bloc Québécois was having a rough time, and they were trying to hang on to the sovereignty angle, which is the word they use for secession. By the late 90s, they were already losing seats. The other mission that they got involved with was opposition to something called the Clarity Act, which was a bill proposed by the Liberal Party under Jean Chrétien, which was going to make it very hard, actually impossible, for Quebec to leave unilaterally. But yeah, over the 2000s, the Bloc Québécois continued to lose seats. And a lot of those seats were moving over to the Liberal Party, which itself was starting to erode in popularity in the rest of the country, as by 2006 we had a Conservative government. This is mostly because of a sponsorship scandal that happened where the Liberals were accused of basically doing some funny stuff with money that was going into Quebec. So basically, ever since the lost referendum, the Bloc Québécois has been a rather left-wing party, but also an attempt to keep Quebec's independence and sovereignty wherever they could. So they were always trying to increase devolution and try to oppose overly oppressive federal intervention in Quebec. It was in 2006, after Stephen Harper got elected, pushed out the Liberals, that the Bloc Québécois kind of showed its colors and kind of betrayed that left-wing vision by supporting a conservative budget. I think this was more out of a long-seated hatred of the Liberal Party than by any actual policy of their own. And now because Quebec didn't feel like they had any left-wing alternative to vote for, and because of the eroding of the Liberal Party due to its being seen as the voice of federal power, the Bloc Québécois actually made some gains in 2008. This was going to be a short-lived victory, by the way. Remember what I said about how in my video about how separatism is very much linked to like the baby boomer generation, that millennials aren't exactly into Quebec becoming independent anymore? Well, in the 2000s, there were a lot of federal elections because the federal government kept having these votes of non-confidence because we couldn't have a majority leader. In 2011, we got that majority government, and it was Stephen Harper's Conservatives. But it had an impact on Quebec. A former politician who unfortunately passed away named Jack Layton ran a really great campaign in 2011, and if you guys have ever heard of something called the Orange Wave or the Orange Crush, that's what happened. As the Liberal Party began to break its spine, the New Democrats, our kind of democratic socialist party, really started to take off in the 2011 election. The NDP, which had been around for over half a century, finally got to the position of official opposition, and the Liberals, for the first time since the founding of the country, were no longer government or official opposition. So the NDP, the Democratic Socialists, made gigantic gains across the country, but one place where they made the most gains was in Quebec. Because if, you guys don't know, Quebec is typically far more left-wing than the rest of the country. It's one of the things I miss about living there. Although they are way more racist against Muslims, but that's a different story for a different time. They had 47 seats from the previous election, and in 2011 they were reduced to 3. Not like 40, not 30. They went from 47 to 3. And to have official party status in government, you actually have to have 12 seats. So they have lost official party status. And this might have stayed for a while. You know, the NDP might have been a strong left-wing and not sovereigntist party in Canadian politics, but then the leader of the NDP, Jack Layton, passed away from prostate cancer that same year. And then in 2014, one of those 3 MPs left the Bloc Québécois, and the bloc was reduced to 2 seats. So in order to prepare for the next election, Gilles Duceppe, that person from earlier, rejoined the party and re-became leader. And he was the leader of the Bloc Québécois during the 2015 election. This is the election you might know because it was the one where Justin Trudeau was made prime minister. So not only did the Liberals make huge gains across the country, with Justin Trudeau going from third party to government to majority government in one very open election night. It was very one-sided. That was, people were really sick of Stephen Harper by that point. But the NDP, because of the loss of Jack Layton and because of issues to do with Quebec sovereignty and because of the NDP's steadfast statement on not hating Muslims, the Bloc Québécois started to gain more popularity. So in 2015, the Bloc Québécois got back to 10 seats. And the Liberal Party actually took a few seats in Quebec as well. But then they got a new leader. Her name is Martine Ouellet, and this is the story that just came out the other day, where her leadership has been considered authoritarian. She's been causing a lot of problems. She's not in government, so she caused a lot of infighting. And now 7 of those 10 Bloc Québécois MPs are now independent. And people are a little worried about what that means for the future of the party. So the battery on this camera is dying. And I want to make a quick note. So yeah, the Bloc Québécois is in a lot of trouble. It's declined a lot since the 90s, and no one's really sure about what the future holds for it. It's kind of falling apart at the seams. And I can't really seem to get a good answer because the English press is not covering it super well. I tried to read some of the French press, but it seems that nobody really knows too much about what's going on. People are saying that the Bloc Québécois is on the ropes, especially because we have an election coming up in 2019, where Justin Trudeau is going to be coming up for re-election, and who knows what the Bloc Québécois is going to do after that. So, like, share, subscribe, check out my show. I actually have a D&D show that is starting on March 12th at Dungeon Dwellers on Twitch. You can find it in the doobly-doo. All right, at this point, we're coming to the end, and the camera actually died, so you guys have a great week. See you on Thursday.